Sustainability aims to use our world's resources efficiently and benefit the environment. Making the right energy choices is crucial for the reduction of pollution in the atmosphere. Renewable energy, for example, not only helps conserve natural resources, but is also a carbon-free source of energy. The level of sustainable development of our nations can also be enhanced by keeping our oceans and coastlines free of waste. Polluted beaches not only hurt the environment, but also have significant adverse impacts on human health. Engaging people from around the world to remove debris from beaches is important in sustainable cleaning routines. In this webinar, we look at how to lower our overall environmental footprint by keeping our coastlines free of waste, and by using green energy sources like landfill gas, wind, geothermal, hydro, and solar energy.
Global Waste Cleaning Network (GWCN) plays a vital role in the growing global movement to reduce the impact of environmental pollution on society, via advocacy, and the implementation of evidence-based programs to reduce pollution on Earth. We are an international non-profit network, comprised of NGOs, educational institutions, private and public companies, and expert consulting firms, that are active and interested in environmental issues related to the management and reduction of waste. Through research and conservation projects, cleanup campaigns, environmental education, and involvement in a range of important international committees, GWCN undertakes concrete steps towards sustainable living. The Environmental Network Research Center (ENRC) is GWCN research body that furthers environmental and efficient energy research activities. Our research programs add greater depth to GWCN's mission of contributing to the advancement of research in waste management, with the goal of conserving and maintaining healthy oceans, coastlines, lands and the atmosphere, for both people and nature. GWCN's work is guided by values and principles, such as respect among network members, fair participation of all members, integrity and openness, and professionalism and accountability. GWCN. Our environment. Our future.
Hello and welcome to this webinar by Global Waste Cleaning Network, GWCN. The theme of today's webinar is Healthy Environment and Sustainable Energy. We'll be joined by leading academics and practitioners in the fields of environment protection and energy later on this webinar. I would like to point out that our presenters will try to reply as much as possible at your live comments here on Facebook. I hope you would enjoy the rest of this webinar, so stay tuned.
Our first presenter is Mr. Charles Perry from the UK. Charles is a green entrepreneur and sustainability expert. Post-BP, he became Director of Green Order, Managing Director of Good Energy, and then co-founded Second Nature, a leading sustainability consultancy for blue-chip clients such as Tesco, which was acquired by Anthesis Group. Charles has a BA from Brown University and an MBA from Cranfield School of Management. He is now founder of Sustainable Future for All, and on the UN COP26 Climate Champions team. His next presentation will be about energy transition from fossil fuel to sustainable energy.
Hello. Thank you so much for having me to GWCN, to Roger and Linus. It's great to be here. I'm Charles Perry. I just wanted to say, Linus, I heard you are not very well, so just wishing you a speedy recovery. So I've been asked to speak about the energy transition, And I just wanted to get going by introducing myself. You can probably see behind me an elephant in Africa about to charge. I'm from South Africa. I've never been to Cameroon, Linus, but I have been to other parts of Africa, in mainly the southern region and East Africa. And yeah, grew up in Johannesburg, left at a young age, moved to the UK, then spent some years in America, then back to Africa again, and now it's probably about 30 years that I've been based in the UK for. I'm a sustainability person who's focused primarily on the energy sector in my career, and that includes 6 years working for BP. So we'll talk about some of these experiences. And just going back to growing up in Africa, and I was definitely influenced to be passionate about wildlife and conservation. And so my earliest memories were trying to find a path in my life that I could work in the environment and also bring environment and business together. It actually started with potentially even thinking at a young age, 12 or 13, about being a game ranger, potentially. Then I realized that I'm not very good with the heat, and being in isolation in remote places. I'm quite a gregarious person, so I realized that wasn't the course for me. But I would never have thought that I would have ended up working for BP when I was a teenager. So I think I might just tell you a little bit about how that happened, given when I graduated from an American university with a degree in political science and a focus in conflict resolution for divided societies. I certainly wasn't thinking about going anywhere near BP, and it took a long time before I did end up going to BP. So what happened there was I was primarily focused with Africa, with South Africa, and with wanting to go back to my home country. And as Alan Payton once asked us when we were schoolboys, what are you going to do for the country that gave you these privileges? And yes, I was privileged as a youngster. I was very well aware of my privileges and the fact that the majority of the country were not only disadvantaged, but they didn't have the vote. They were discriminated against in the awful apartheid system by the color of one's skin. And Nelson Mandela was on Robben Island, incarcerated for 27 years of his life. And the sort of apartheid government's strategy was really to try and eradicate the leadership of the ANC from public consciousness. And as a young white boy, we didn't often talk about the leaders of the struggle, whether they be incarcerated in jail, for example, Robben Island, or whether they were operating in exile. We were, they kept us tried to keep us cocooned from what was really going on in our country. So studying political science in America, all the horrors were revealed, and I wanted to go back and play a role. And I'm going to just quote Nelson Mandela. One of the amazing quotes that he said that inspired me was, "It always seems impossible until it's done." So I think the same with the energy transition. But at that point in my life, it was about ending apartheid and bringing about the new South Africa, which Nelson Mandela and his fellow leaders did. I played a bit part in that I got a job for the Independent Electoral Commission coming out of university. So worked for the Independent Electoral Commission, organizing the democratic elections that yielded Nelson Mandela becoming our president. I was also involved in his inaugural committee organizing team. And, those moments were very special, and they led to me living back in South Africa in my 20s for 5 years, and then only leaving for the second time to go to business school which I did at Cranfield. And I believe that Cranfield's involved now with GWCN. I'm very pleased to hear that. I did my MBA there. I focused it on the business case for sustainability. And that was when I started thinking about, okay, now what am I going to do with my life post the new South Africa having been brought to us by Nelson Mandela. And coming out of business school, it was either, to be honest, BP, or it was probably going to an NGO on the other end of the spectrum in terms of being outside the tent rather than being inside the tent. With the help of my mentor, Jonathan Porritt, I decided to go inside the tent to be what then became known as an intrapreneur. Change from within. Us Cranfield MBAs fancied ourselves as change agents. And I was one of the team that did. My first job at BP was the rebranding of the company with the sun, the Helios, the Greek symbol for the sun, the sort of slogan "Beyond Petroleum," and the 4 new core values of the company: green for environmental responsibility, progressive for societal upliftment, performance-driven for financial sustainability, and innovative for the overarching culture. So we were embracing the triple bottom line of sustainability. I had read John Elkington's book in my 20s called Cannibals with Forks, the cannibals being the corporations, vying for acquisitions, tearing each other in the process in a cannibalistic way. And John Elkington's book simply said, look, could you use some table manners, the fork of civilized behavior, representing the triple bottom line of not only financial sustainability, but also environmental and social sustainability. So I became a subscriber to that philosophy, and again, was influenced a lot by John Elkington. He became my second mentor, and the two of those, Jonathan and John's, if you like, have been very influential in my career trajectory. So in BP, Beyond Petroleum, now that obviously became very controversial. Question was, well, to what extent does BP really actually believe in this, or is this just a marketing gimmick? And what percentage of BP's investments, capex, are going into renewable energy as opposed to upstream oil and gas exploration? And the answer was often, very disappointing. It was a tiny percentage, 1 or 2%, and everyone would look at that number and think, oh well, then it cannot be strategic intent. It must just be a marketing gimmick. Internally at BP, we actually got quite fired up about the new brand, the set of values, and what we could do potentially in changing from being an oil and gas company to being a global energy and potentially a global green energy company. And I was certainly of that mindset with the colleagues that I was working with in group marketing. But we had some naysayers across the corridor, and no doubt that represented, the dichotomy in the culture of, what had we done well in the past in terms of sticking to the knitting, was extracting oil and gas and acquiring other companies to gain competitive advantage and mark cap on doing exactly that well and better than they could do it, versus potentially the future is not going to be fossil fuels forever. So what could we do in renewable energy? The second part of my time at BP was actually running the renewable energy business and building that up, proving gross margin, because we started small, of course, and essentially then pitching to the board with Lord Brown and the board on investing for material investing in renewables and alternatives, and we got that $8 billion, and we created BP Alternative Energy, And we felt good about that. And it's probably safe to say that in 2007, BP was arguably the largest renewable energy company on the planet. And then, of course, everything came unstuck. I left in 2006, 6 months before John Brown left. And I was rather embarrassed, let's say, for the subsequent period to see what happened to, a once most admired company. We won all the Dow Jones Sustainability Awards year after year, FTSE for Good. John Brown personally got the sort of Chief Executive of the Year, globally admired and recognized company that many young people wanted to join, and optimistic about the future of energy being cleaner. So it was disheartening, to say the least, and more so when we found out that Tony Hayward, and let's be honest, those of us who knew the succession story inside BP, we knew the minute we heard that name that that was not going to be favorable to renewable energy. Indeed, he was the only member of the ExCo to vote against our pitch to get 8 billion to create the alternative energy segment. He was quite clear that he didn't think BP should be doing renewables, that BP was an oil and gas company, would always be an oil and gas company, and that we should stick to our knitting. That's what he had been taught at business school, and that was his mantra: stick to the knitting and create shareholder value by extracting ever greater amounts of oil and gas from the ground, even if it's difficult oil and gas, which of course it was by then, more and more difficult, and even if one has to actually, really try and crank up the culture to do that faster in order to compete the competitors. So BP went back to petroleum in a very profound way, and indeed started selling off all the renewable energy assets and moving out of that. Tony Hayward made what's become quite a well-known speech at Stanford, his old business school, where he said, I quote, "We have too many people working here to save the planet. We need to return to our primary purpose, which is to create shareholder value." That is typical sort of MBA speak. Problem with that is a year and a half later, the market cap of BP was half of what it was on the day that he said those words. And if you juxtapose that speech with Lord Brown's speech in 1997, 10 years earlier, at the same business school, Stanford, also a graduate of that illustrious institution, Lord Brown had said, we have to adopt a precautionary principle because climate change is real and humans are causing climate change. So in one fell swoop, Tony Hayward was really sending a signal to 100,000 members of staff that things were changing, that essentially those folks working on renewable energy were not going to be valued, and indeed the signal was that that business was going to be closed down. He also had an internal memo to the staff. I mentioned the 4 core values, which we held dear, and definitely as a group marketing senior leader, I can tell you that in the market research, there was a lot of engagement in the 4 values, and we had the Helios Awards that motivated behavior around the values, and we had it linked to performance, contracts, etc. So when the green value was then dropped, which it was, shockingly, dropped in favor of responsible as the new value, that sent a signal that actually you didn't really need to be green any longer. And indeed, if you were, then maybe you should go somewhere else, because as he said, we had too many people working at BP to save the planet. So I thought when I heard that he could have at least just added responsible as a 5th value rather than deleting green and the message that sends to the culture of his style of leadership. So, it wasn't actually that surprising to me that things started to go from bad to worse from an environmental point of view in terms of BP's willingness to take added risk and to cut corners in the pursuit of profits in the short term. And we know the results. The worst oil spill in history happened in the Gulf of Mexico. And I have commentated on that publicly many times in the media. And I think it was very much linked to what I've just been describing, taking crazy risks to try and return, profits that really were becoming rather obscene at that point compared to other companies in other sectors. And BP was sure enough getting quite a lot of pushback on the extent to which the billions of dollars were mounting up in its favor, and the pay packages of leadership were reflecting that. And of course, that shocking moment as well when on his yacht he was quizzed about the Gulf of Mexico, and he said, well, he essentially he didn't want it to ruin his holiday. Now, that might sound sort of very disloyal in terms of a person who used to work for BP and what I'm describing, but I'm actually engaged with BP at the moment, in regular contact with the guys that I used to work for, who I have huge respect for, and I believe that the current chief executive is trying to get back on the Beyond Petroleum track in earnest, with the net zero by 2050 commitments, with the new investing in renewables, and the admission that we are now at the peak of oil and gas, and that the future is actually renewable energy. So it has come full circle. It started a long time ago, and I think we were ahead of our time, but not too early. I think we actually got a lot of first mover credits for our leadership as a company in the year 2000, 2001. Don't forget, it's the turn of the century, and stakeholders were looking for companies that had vision, that had values. I call it vision-led and values-driven companies, and that were going to be part of the solution to the world's problems like climate change, and societal and environmental degradation, rather than exacerbating the problem. And so I think the issue was that the board did not, in the succession of Lord Brown, did not insist that that strategy was continued. It's always a journey. It's always stepping stones and continuous improvement. But if you've already given a public brand promise that you are now the sun and you are green and optimistic around renewable energy, you're no longer British Petroleum, and then you turn away from that only 5 years into that new trajectory, and you start selling your renewable energy assets and giving messages like green is no longer important, then of course it's going to become a liability, and you're going to go down with the ship. And BP, unfortunately, the share price is a classic story. It just sunk, and the liabilities and the debts and the payoffs, cleanup bills, etc., became just a yoke on a once great company, and the reputational damage overnight was enormous. So I think it was a very sad story, but I think now things are moving in the right direction again. Now I give you that journey as a BP person to illustrate, the challenges of trying to navigate the energy transition, to do it with your stakeholders. Of course, your investors are key. You've got to bring them along with you. And why is it so critical that we do this in a successful way at this point? Now, I think all of you listening will know that, the state of the planet, the state of humanity is in peril. And we really are on a cliff edge in many different ways, not least the COVID crisis, but that's a symbol of health and what we've done with antibiotic abuse and not understanding microbes on a health level, and then on a climate basis, but not understanding the extent to which we're damaging the narrow band of atmosphere that sustains all life, and also on a sort of on a well-being basis, what we've done in terms of the inequality in the world, exacerbating pollution. People who are disadvantaged are hit the hardest. Air quality, again, the suffering of many communities around pollution. So it's pretty clear, and it should be to everyone by now, that pollution is the enemy. I mean, pollution is clearly the biggest problem in the world in terms of all of its kinds. So whether that's pollution of our air quality, or pollution of the atmosphere, or the oceans, or our own living areas with germs, which of course kill, as we see with COVID. We have degraded our natural capital, and we've degraded our human capital. It's a great framework called the 5 Capitals framework that, once again, Jonathan Porritt and his colleagues at Forum for the Future came up with a long time ago. And yes, we've degraded those capitals, and of course everything collapses. We have system collapse on the back of degradation, and the question then is, well, how do you have systemic solutions or system solutions to counter the systemic risk that we face, and to lead us to a sustainable future for ourselves, our children, and future generations? Because clearly what we've had has been unsustainable with the extraordinary increase in the number of people on the planet. When my great-grandfather was born, there was only 1.5 billion people, and now we're approaching 8 billion people. So then the role of fossil fuels in this, and why did I join BP? Fossil fuels took many people out of poverty over decades in the Industrial Revolution, and fossil fuels replaced the previous era, which was human energy in the form of slavery. And we had to abolish slavery because of its negative impacts on people and on society. I mean, when the abolitionists argued that this was morally reprehensible, there were big corporations that said, well, it's our livelihoods, and the British East India Company was the biggest of those. But the story is interesting because, William Wilberforce, who became very famous as an abolitionist in the UK House of Commons, his foe was a person like Charles Grant, the chief exec of the British East India Company. And eventually they did come to a reckoning, a mutual acceptance that there would be more energy and more economic upliftment from fossil fuels post the invention of the steam engine, which happened at that time, and the signals that actually you could do fossil fuels in an economic way with the support of government, so with taxpayers' subsidies, nationalized companies supported by governments could bring affordable energy from fossil fuels to replace human energy, which was obviously the previous era. And this would be morally acceptable, economically viable. Now, there wasn't a lot of talk at that time about environmentally what would that look like. So then when you do get to 8 billion people on the planet burning, a week's, burning in 1 week 1 million years worth of fossilized matter, then of course it does become very negative, not only on the planet, but on humanity itself, in terms of the limits, uh, that sustain us. And I mentioned the sort of, the atmosphere, the thickness of the atmosphere. I mean, if it's likened to, the coat of varnish around an orange, that would be the same relative thickness uh, uh, to the planet. It's sort of 30 miles, which we can run. Some of us, I can't do that any longer, but at one point I could run 30 miles, and that's all it is. That is the thickness of the atmosphere, which sustains all life. So if you're 8 billion people spewing filth into that tiny band of atmosphere, then of course things change. They change on the temperature front in terms of the increase of CO2, which is directly correlated to the increase in carbon dioxide. They also change in terms of the air quality that we breathe, and the oxygen that goes to our brains, for example, becomes a problem, especially if you're living in cities where you can hardly see the other side of the street. And we suddenly have a whole new set of challenges for the sustainability of the future, whether that be human sustainability or planetary sustainability. I remember John Brown, actually, about 10 years after he left BP, I asked him a question at a talk about environmental collapse. And he actually said, the planet will recover in time. What won't recover is humanity, the human species, in any sort of state of upliftment. And humanity could largely be devastated forever. And species do become extinct. The human species has been a very successful species, but now, like with yeast in a jar, gets to a critical mass when the yeast having been the fastest reproducing organism, they then turn on each other and cannibalize and decimate each other. So it can be very bleak if we don't take personal responsibility and do something about it. John Brown took that personal responsibility, and many people who are listening are taking that personal responsibility in their lives, in whichever fields they work, to try and actually bring about a better future for the next generations. That's where the concept of sustainability or sustainable development was derived. It was defined at the Earth Summit in Rio as meeting the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. So it is about custodianship, stewardship. We have finite resources that we've been using, but now we've been abusing them. And so finite resources run out, of course. That is the inherent problem of capitalism that doesn't have any value for what is valuable in the sense of what sustains us. So our ecosystems, for example, our rainforests, the air that we breathe, the climate, nature itself, etc., etc. So what needs to change, of course, is we need to move to a new model of capitalism. This model 1.0, I call it, is now no longer fit for purpose. In fact, it's totally destructive. But other models, socialism and communism, they haven't been proven to help with what we're talking about, sustainability. So we need to have an evolution of the model that we've been using in business capitalism to a more sustainable model of capitalism, where these externalities are internalized, most importantly pollution. As someone in the UK Parliament once said, the market has a blind spot, and the blind spot is the planet. So until you find a way to actually internalize those and move away from indicators like gross domestic product to something that's much more around health and sustainability, which is the topic of today's webinar. Of course, we will not be able to shift our behavior as countries and as competitive countries, nations, to doing the right thing in an urgent enough way. So the playing field needs to change, and we need on a new playing field, which is a level playing field, i.e. subsidies are removed from fossil fuels. We know that globally there are about 6 times more for fossil fuels than there are for renewable energy. So I would say we just need to remove subsidies from all forms of energy and let it compete on a new playing field in a new way. I mean, we've already seen with the cost curves of renewable energy, they've come down so quickly, much to everybody's surprise, that now solar and onshore wind are the 2 cheapest forms of electricity in the world, and they've undercut those cost curves of finite forms of energy. It includes fossil fuels and nuclear and etc. So it is very competitive now to be on renewable energy. Clearly, storage is the next challenge, which again, the cost of storage are coming down radically with batteries and hydrogen and other forms of storage. So that's very exciting, and there's no reason at all that we now can't wean ourselves off fossil fuels forever and move to this new era of clean and sustainable energy. And humanity works in cycles. We go through eras, and there was the Iron Age and the Stone Age and the Bronze Age, for example. And then, sadly, we had the age of human energy that I mentioned in the form of human slavery. And then we had fossil fuels, and I say had because we're at the end. This is the twilight of fossil fuels, and there certainly has been some good about what fossil fuels have done, and there's been a lot of bad. And on balance, the point is that we became over-dependent. We were addicted to using too much of fossilized ancient matter. So ancient sunlight is a good way to describe it. Someone did in a book called The Last Days of Ancient Sunlight. And we no longer need to use ancient sunlight. We have more energy in the form of the wind, the sun, the waves, the tides, the thermals that are renewable, and we can use those provided free from nature, as long as we just harness them and bring them to all people. So we can address the inequity issue as well through renewable energy by bringing renewables very easily into very remote parts of the world. These models like M-Copa in Africa, the pay-as-you-go model, where a bit of kit is installed, both solar PV and some batteries in a remote area off-grid, and then customers are on mobile payments and they pay as you go. And the health benefits of that are enormous as well, because you can replace paraffin and kerosene in the home. So I'm excited that we are in the twilight of the fossil fuel era. I'm pleased that my old company BP is once again leading the way. I was saddened that it lost its path and had to be jolted into remembering the values that it once had and that it has now embraced, or is in the process of embracing again. I'm not naive to think that we're out of the woods and these companies are now becoming saints. Of course, they're not, but I do think that several of them are now showing signs of wanting to be materially part of the solution, that they accept that that is the only way to continue in business in the future, is to be part of the solution and provide what people now need, which is cleanliness on all fronts, eradication of harmful pollutants on all fronts. And the companies that are able to deliver that will be the winners in the future. I'll add that companies like ExxonMobil are at grave risk of disappearing completely, because the signs of evolution there are not looking as hopeful. And I would say to anyone who's linked to ExxonMobil and some of the other American oil and gas companies that have not embraced sustainability, that now's your chance to get on the right side of history and become part of the solution, or become dinosaurs like many other companies have become. So I am optimistic, but I know that we're still facing severe fallout from pollution that's already happened, that's built into the system now. And we've seen melting permafrost, we've seen what's happening at the poles, and we've seen the desertification of large parts of the earth. And my home country, South Africa, is one of those. Unfortunately, we saw what happened in Cape Town with running out of water a couple of years ago, and people in sub-Saharan Africa, in Africa, have struggled and will now struggle more because of the selfishness of a lot of these huge companies with their obscene profits in the past. So I just despair at the temperature increases that we are in for already. I'm afraid it's way beyond 1.5 degrees centigrade. And in parts of the world, it's much more than that. But I do think there's still technological pathways that can help us mitigate and adapt to the worst. And for example, actually sucking carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere is not as crazy as it sounds. I mean, indeed, that's what trees do. So even massive tree planting programs all over the world should be welcomed, and any nature-based solution that is actually going to restore the balance by bringing carbon dioxide from a gas form back into a solid form, like it once was, of course, before we perversely exhumed it in unbelievably quick ways. So technology can once again help us to sustain the human species. I mean, the steam engine was the sign of a joyous way out of the horrors of slavery. And now, once again, the technologies of the clean era can bring us out of the worst of what's happened with the fossil fuel era. And that is how we learn and grow. So, as I said, cycles, it's continuous improvement. Sustainability is a journey. And we at the Climate Champions, where I spend half my time, I'm an entrepreneur in the field of sustainability and have done quite a few different businesses, but half of my time at the moment is on the Climate Champions team, which is the UN COP26 team. And we are mobilizing action on climate in the run-up to the COP26 negotiations that are happening in Glasgow, Scotland, end of 2021, to build on the Paris Agreement, which was a great moment in history in France, when we came together and agreed to all collectively keep climate change mitigated to within 2 degrees maximum increase. And I believe that we now, with President Biden in the White House, we now have a real chance of limiting the worst fallout imaginable. And we could never have done it if Trump had won another term, because of course he's a denier of anything green. To be quite honest, even though he says he is America's got a great record on environment, and he is cares about it. Of course, he calls climate change a hoax, and on that alone, he won't listen to the science. Similar with the COVID crisis, and he has led us backwards. And of course, his hires were people from the fossil fuel industry, largely deniers. And even a person like Rex Tillerson, who was once chief executive of ExxonMobil, I shuddered when I heard that he had been called in, and Ted Cruz, etc. Really, we have gone backwards in the world. In the last 5 years, we've gone backwards dramatically since the Paris Agreement was signed. But we have a chance with President Biden. We now have a chance November next year. So we ask all of you to support the Race to Zero campaign. Become what my mentor John Elkington calls, and has written a book about it, zero noughts, because zero noughts leave no footprint. And zero noughts are racing to do that, to actually have zero pollution associated with their impacts, whether that's on a personal basis, on a family basis, on an organizational basis, or on a country basis. Globally, we need to get to that. We need to get beyond that, but that would be a good start. And I'll just leave you with a great book that I once read, I would recommend, is called Confessions of a Radical Industrialist by Ray Anderson. So I'm honoring him by mentioning this. He passed away a few years ago. But I tell lots of people to read this book. He was a brilliant businessman, Harvard Business School, operator in the textiles and carpet manufacturing industry. And he said that, when he was chief exec, he got to $1 billion revenue without once thinking about pollution, because he knew that it was legal, and his plants, as they called in America, were within legal boundaries of the pollution that they spewed out. So it was only when a customer complained to him, quite a sizable customer, that the pollution of one of his plants in a particular neighborhood was causing a lot of alarm amongst the community, many of whom were actually supporting and employed by that particular company called Interface. And Ray Anderson got his team together, and he said, well, what are we going to do to eradicate pollution? Because plants shouldn't have any pollution associated with them in the sense of the natural form of a plant has zero waste. So how can we get to a zero waste outcome for a manufacturing company in the textiles and carpeting world? So he charged his team with figuring out a strategy, and it became known as Mission Zero. And Ray in his book described Mission Zero as like climbing Mount Sustainability, extremely challenging, but every level that they achieved, base camp, camp 1, camp 2, camp 3, meant that they were learning and growing as a culture in ways that they had never anticipated, how to become much more efficient and wasteless. And that, of course, returned to the bottom line, and it made their customers and staff very happy, as well as their investors and other stakeholders. So it became extremely successful, and Interface is often hailed as one of the great case studies of a journey to sustainability. So any listeners out there, whichever companies you're involved in, be part of the Race to Zero, be on that journey, as you, I hope, will be, to sustainability. It's continuous improvement. You never quite get there, but as long as you're going in the right direction. And it's always about moving from linear to circular. Linear models are wasteful. Circular is where you become resource efficient and you eradicate waste, which is why people talk about the circular economy. And of course, sustainable capitalism is going to be a much more circular way of doing business, not just take, make, and throw. It's a client of mine, Tesco, learned that lesson with our help and saved a lot of money, over £1 million per store in moving from linearity to circularity. And that journey still goes on, and it's had enormous benefits for Tesco. So yeah, thanks again to GWCN and all of you listeners. I hope I haven't gone on too long, but it's been a joy to be part of this.
Thank you, Charles, for taking us through the elaborate aspects of transition from fossil fuel to sustainable energy. Next, Professor Amitabh Malik from India will be talking about renewable energy and its importance in making a sustainable future for humankind. Professor Malik has been a research scientist in the Ministry of Defense for 35 years, till his retirement in 2002, and he has since become an environment technology advisor. He has authored 6 books on technology, security, and energy issues, and he continues to write and speak on climate change and energy transition subjects. Professor Amitabh Malik is a founding trustee of the Pune International Centre PIC, a think tank on public policy research, established in 2011 in Pune, India. He launched a major initiative on climate literacy in 2018 at PIC, and he is the lead author of a recent report on making Pune net carbon neutral by 2030, with a focus on energy efficiency, emission reduction and carbon sequestration, for mitigating global warming.
Hello everybody, and greetings from Pune International Centre in Pune, Maharashtra, India. My name is Amitabh Malik. I'm a trustee of Pune International Centre, and also I head the initiative on energy, environment and climate change. At the onset, let me thank GWCN for inviting me to participate in this webinar and share my thoughts on the subject of renewable energy as the key to our future. So let me share my presentation here, and let's get started. Okay. To begin with, I'm talking about RE abundance for sustainable future. Looking back, we know that in matters of environment, climate change, delay is the killer, because the whole process is complex, silent, cumulative, where extreme can become normal. What has changed in the last 50 years is global population has almost doubled, 4 billion to 7.7 billion. Energy use has gone up 4 times, 6,200 terawatt hours to almost 2,400 terawatt hours. Carbon dioxide emission per year has increased from 16 gigatons to about 37.7 gigatons as of last year. Carbon dioxide level has increased from 320 ppm to 415 ppm this year. It's also important to understand that carbon dioxide emissions are invisible, cumulative, and long-lasting. Once they are in the atmosphere, they last for almost hundreds of years. So clearly, climate change is becoming the largest existential threat, and the future will depend on the policies regarding environment, energy, climate change, economics, etc. These policies have to be fine-tuned. It's very important that they are fine-tuned. Otherwise, human priorities will shrink to just a struggle for existence or struggle for survival. What must change now, and very rapidly, is that climate actions must begin with locally, then it goes to the national goals, And then, of course, there should be global cooperation so that it all adds up. Technological advances can actually make a big difference, but provided it is handled without greed, without mistakes. Therefore, sustainable energy, ecosystem, and lifestyle changes will be very critical for our future. And the last line is important because I'm saying all this is happening by our choice. So the human choices will ultimately determine what kind of future mankind actually wants. Next, we see that the 20th century has thrived on coal for electricity and oil and gas for transport. This was a fossil fuel economy. Development and success have become synonymous with wealth creation, either with business, technology, knowledge, whatever it is. In the process, Earth resources were exploited at exponential rate, and global GHG level have increased to 415 pm, as I said. We seem to be on a pathway to 4 degrees Celsius global warming by 2100, and of course, beyond that, it will get even more worse. Renewable energy, RE, like solar and wind, have now become very competitive to fossil fuel, and RE can in fact limit carbon pollution, emission, and environmental damage while still continuing to fuel economic growth. This is the new reality that one must understand. Earlier, the perception was that RE will be, or environmental protection will be at a cross purpose with economic progress, but that's no longer true. Therefore, RE can be abandoned with storage technology and innovation for 24/7 clean energy access, and technology advances are continuing to progress, promising unique energy independence nationally and energy security for all within easy reach. Economic progress cannot have any conflict with environment and ecological preservation. Sustainable future will demand synergy between economic growth and progress, as well as environmental and ecological stability. Rapid transition to clean and sustainable renewable energy is not just a solution for mitigating climate change. I would emphasize that RE is the key to sustainable progress and prosperity for humanity in future. I now get down to the specific of technologies and promises and potentials. We all know that wind and solar technology has made tremendous advances in the past 7-8 years. Globally, wind now provides nearly 6% of RE, and solar is at 4% of RE, but then the solar is picking up much faster. Solar radiation on Earth, that is above the atmosphere, is about 13 kilowatt at meters square, but it is about 1/7 at the equator on the surface. Solar PV efficiency has increased from 14% to 20%, and it's promising to be 30% in the next 3 years. And actually, there are technology promises that it can even go up to 37% very soon. Today, 10 square meter of panel can give about a kilowatt of power, and for 5 hours you can get about 5 kilowatt energy for each sunny day. 10 square kilometers can therefore provide 5 million units of electricity per day. Technology has also progressed in terms of the material of the solar cell, and instead of the typical silicon that has been prevalent, there are many other materials that have been tried out. And the latest, of course, is the perovskite. This is a different material that offers already 30% efficiency, and it's making a lot of innovative progresses. The new design, which is something like a hot carrier device, could actually give us 66% efficiency within the next 10-12 years. These kinds of new material, which are low cost, high efficiency, ultra thin, flexible, and of course cost effective, can be game changer for the solar power beyond 2030. Unfortunately, the flip side is that the wind is not always blowing and the sun is not always shining. So therefore, power on demand will require battery storage for 24/7 supply of clean, renewable energy. Lithium batteries have changed what we today use in mobile phones, electric cars, and of course they are applicable for all remote access, electrical power access. It could stretch to all kinds of things, but they do have certain limitations. First of all, the material itself is mineral, which will have a limit in terms of extraction. And they're efficient compared to what we had in the past, but they're not there where in the context of what we want. So lithium-ion batteries probably need to be 20 times less costly or 20x cost reduction. And of course, their power density also should go up by probably 10x. These are the kind of efforts that are continuing in progress at the Tesla factory in USA. Many of you might have heard about the Tesla wall, which provides you solar power for a single house, or the Tesla car, which is hugely getting popular, not only because it is green or environmental friendly, but it is competitive in terms of performance, cost, maintenance, and so on and so forth. So this kind of technology innovations are now the game that is going on. Over 100 innovations are in progress for solar energy or for solar for plus battery for 24/7 power capacity. While this has been talked in terms of small units, ultimately RE must also support the grid, and therefore we also have to look at grid size storages. One, of course, is the gravity storage using water, where you pump the water up when there is energy, and when you let the water come down by gravity, creating electricity when the solar is not there. Similarly, there can be different kind of batteries, which are the new generation is the liquid flow battery that are using different material, not just the lithium. And there are also organic batteries called organic reduction and oxidation batteries. So plenty of options are opening up, and the energy future that we are looking at will not be just a mirror of the past. It will actually be radically very different. Next, we take a look at a specific innovation that is a wind-solar hybrid mini tower. This is work that is done in Denmark by the university students. It's a 6-foot vertical wind generator that can be put on a highway median, and it will rotate with the passing vehicles, the wind created by the passing vehicles. On the top, it has a 300-watt solar panel placed at 30-meter gaps. 300 such units can give 30 kilowatt of power per day for every kilometer of the highway path. Deployed at 3 highways in Denmark, these are presently powering 3,000 homes, and it is also ideal for tall buildings, of course, the roofs that have strong winds. The technology is continuously evolving. Futuristic new compact designs are now in laboratory. They have no blades, and they can do power generation more efficiently than the traditional wind power generators. Another aspect of solar is that it can be generated in a distributed mode, and it can also be generated in a shared mode. That has many advantages. with growing population in urban areas, and this urbanization is a typical phenomena, particularly in the developing world, there is a need that major cities worldwide must use locally generated green RE for achieving net carbon neutrality as soon as possible, which would use local RE green microgrids, and the potential of such distributed solar, rooftop solar, is almost 40% of the total requirement. Rooftop solar or standalone with battery or inverter. The other version can be also grid interactive rooftop solar with net metering. These are all unique advantages that there is a zero land cost. They are highly efficient because there are no transmission losses. It is very fast for erection, takes a matter of few weeks to erect them and install them. And of course, it gives you energy independence. Energy independence is a very interesting word because it means you need not depend on anybody else, either abroad, foreign country, or even your neighboring state for your energy. And this kind of energy independence can ideally be used for backup power, like the diesel gensets. It can be used for agricultural pumps in remote areas, remote villages. It can be very useful for remote tourism. It can be ideally used for defense units that are in remote locations. This principle of sharing has been further enhanced, where at the 2015 conference itself, an international solar alliance was announced by India and France to begin with. It is an alliance of 121 nations, mostly sunshine countries, situated between the around the equator, or it is a treaty-based organization to create a global market for solar power and the solar devices. 75 nations have signed on for the global collective to promote clean energy products and applications. You can know more at the site that is quoted here. India has also sponsored something different, something more. It is called One World, One Sun, One Grid. It's an initiative for shared solar power generation by neighboring countries. Almost 140 have shown willingness to join. So this sharing will be by different geographical locations in the east and west of India. And this can provide, instead of 4 hours or 5 hours at a precise location, at a given location, this will actually provide a 20-hour kind of a solar radiation available on a shared benefits for a larger population. This again can be game changing, because ultimately basic availability of solar power is being increased from 5 hours per day to 20 hours per day. Major changes. Let's look at some other options. The renewable energy, of course, but other areas and other options. For instance, one can talk about the rural sectors in developing countries particularly. Agriculture as such produces the food crops, and of course there are byproducts like crop husk. Efficient burning of this kind of thing can produce combined heat and heat power units, CHP units they are called. This is providing energy to the local regions and increasing the crop value while reducing the agri waste. So it's multiple advantages, and therefore is getting momentum. Biomass CHP units and biogas production units can provide base load energy for non-urban areas through bio-microgrids along with their value-added services. Other options include small hydro that have huge potential in hilly regions where rivulets and other streams can be used for hydropower generation, and then they can be shared and distributed over microgrids. Another good option is the geothermal and wave energy possibilities that are there for countries that have a long coastline like India. And all this are being, of course, tried out. Yet another very promising option is the hydrogen. Hydrogen fuel cells is actually an ideal renewable energy for all future transport applications, whether it is on the roads, in water, or even including aviation. Fundamental hydrogen fuel cell is nothing but combining hydrogen and oxygen, equal parts, to give you H2O with the water plus electricity. It's a process of electricity, it's not a combustion, and therefore there are no emissions. There are problems, that technology is evolving. The problems are that its storage as a gas requires very high power, very high pressure storage, and its storage in liquid form will require supercooled liquid systems. But the advantage is that its energy potential is very large. Let me now come to the last part of my presentation, which is the global scenario in terms of what are the challenges. World leaders must join hands with scientists, civil society, and business to increase international cohesiveness for climate action. Unfortunately, despite so many meetings and despite so much talk, actual reduction is yet to happen. So there is urgent need to create a collective ambition. Nations must feel ambitious about managing the environment. They need to revise their national CO2 equivalent emission reduction targets and go beyond the 2015 NDC commitments, nationally determined commitments that were made in 2015. Within 5 years, they have become kind of notional because much more is required. There is a need for an unprecedented shift in the existing system dynamics. Not just one or two things, but the way we do things, the way we perform our duties, our life, conduct our life, everything has to be changed, and therefore I'm talking about as a holistic definition in system dynamics. Part of that, of course, will be adoption to renewable energy abundance and use of technological innovations for 24/7 abundant clean power, as well as, of course, carbon capture and storage to reduce the emissions for carbon neutrality by 2050. That's the goal that most of the nations in the world are today working for. We must switch to low carbon economy for sustainable development. So when we are talking about sustainability using RE, one must know that that's not just enough. That's indeed important, but not entirely adequate. So we must also change the way of life. Low carbon economy must include careful management of water, food, solid waste. These must strengthen the biodiversity, soil health, and human health priorities. Human civilization needs a global political resolve to make a bold and conscious transition to a new way of life, which has to be more in sync with nature. So transition to RE, as I said, is indeed important, but reducing energy demand will be very, very vital. Next, my last kind of a presentation slide. And this is India's basic in a way. After 20 odd conferences under the UNFCCC, since 1991, there is as yet no clear reduction in GHG as yet. Hence, at the Paris conference, 195 countries agreed to voluntarily reduce the NDC and prevent crossing 2 degrees centigrade warming until up to the year of 2100. India is committed to reducing the emission intensity of its GDP by about 35% with reference to 2005 level, and this must be achieved by 2030, which again I think personally is doable. India also committed to creating an additional carbon sink capacity of 300 billion ton through additional tree cover technology solutions, etc. This, I believe, is doable, but more difficult. Things are happening. The third NDC commitment of India was 40% electric power generation from non-fossil fuel sources, that is by renewable energy resources by 2030. But I believe this target can be increased to 50% given the record that's happening and the way we are working. Another aspect is that 70% of the total carbon emissions are due to the energy consumption in urban areas world over. Therefore, cities must actually take the initiative for reducing their total energy demand and reduce the net carbon footprint, so that if the cities can reduce their footprint, major cities in a nation or globally, that would be the beginning of the reducing carbon reduction process. Rapid progress in renewable energy, solar, wind, biogas, small hydro, geothermal, all are very important. And in these areas, India is, of course, trying its best to increase its capacity. India's carbon sequestration capacity also has to improve by almost tenfold by 2030. Again, work in progress. Technology for net carbon neutrality will be crucial for bridging the emission gap. Difficult in next 10-20 years, but serious local efforts plus technology innovations are helping a lot. To end my presentation, I'm giving this graphic of what the world is. It is the trees above and the fossil fuel below. The carbon cycle is both foundation to all our life on Earth, and it's also the source of all energy consumed by human civilization. Most of the Earth carbon, about 65,500 billion metric tons, is stored in the rocks. The rest is in the ocean, atmosphere, plants, soil, fuel, fossils, etc. And that is the balance that we have disturbed. And that is the balance that we need to restore. So thank you.
Thank you, Professor Malik. Now, we will switch to another environmental topic, which relates to the global initiatives of coastlines cleaning. Sarah Kohler, our next presenter, serves as the outreach manager for the International Coastal Cleanup under Ocean Conservancy's Trash-Free Seas program. She enjoys working with a fantastic network of beach and waterway cleanup organizers worldwide, along with passionate educators and individuals, who take action on the issue in their own communities. She manages the creation and distribution of education and outreach materials for action-based solutions, and maintains Ocean Conservancy's online ocean trash database. Sarah is an American, and she holds a bachelor's degree in biology and environmental studies from Eckerd College, and has been with Ocean Conservancy for 7 years. She's had the pleasure of representing the Trash-Free Seas program at a number of local, state, and national marine debris meetings and conferences. Let's hear from her.
Hello, my name is Sarah Kohler, and I'm the Outreach Manager for the International Coastal Cleanup with Ocean Conservancy's Trash-Free Seas program. Before I begin, I want to thank everyone at the Global Waste Cleaning Network and all of the organizers of this event, especially Linus Ayengwo Embe and Mr. Dr. Achkar for inviting me to be part of this presentation. First, a little bit about Ocean Conservancy. We're an organization based in Washington, D.C., United States, and we do have some smaller offices around the U.S. We have worked since 1972 on a number of different missions for our ocean, and our work and our programs have evolved as various threats to our ocean have come to light over the years. We have, in one shape or form, always had a focus on the issue of marine debris or trash making its way into the ocean, marine litter, however, the multiple ways that we call this problem. But I also wanted to just show some of the other program work that we do. The Trash Free Seas program that I'm a part of is unique in that we are much more international in our work and in our focus. And then I also included our mission there at the bottom, because what I think is really special about what we do is that we try to focus on threats that impact our ocean, and not only for the wildlife that we love, but also for all of the resources and the other ways that we as humans depend upon our waterways. So to dive into the issue, I'm sure if you are here listening to this presentation, you have heard about the plastic ocean problem, the plastic pollution problem that we're facing as a global community. So some of these statistics and numbers may not be new to you. And we've seen just an explosion in recent years of media attention, even just in social media, around this threat facing our ocean. But really a big tipping point was a publication of a paper by Dr. Jenna Jembeck et al. In 2015 that really tried to, for the first time, measure just how much plastics were entering our ocean each year. And they came upon this estimate of about 8 million metric tons into the ocean annually. So that's about a dump truck's worth of garbage every minute. Which is basically astounding, right? It's hard to even wrap our minds around what this issue is and how we can really tackle it. Luckily, we've been doing work on this for years, and there is a huge groundswell of other organizations and just everything from the grassroots level all the way up to national governments and international funding mechanisms that are really starting to turn their attention and focus on this issue. And we probably all know the impacts. This is an issue that impacts over 800 marine species globally, all species of sea turtles, shorebirds, marine mammals. We know about the threat of entanglement. We are beginning to just understand the impacts that ingestion of marine debris might have. The science is in particular looking at the ingestion of microplastics up the food chain and what that might mean for seafood, which is a protein that many in our world rely on. And then of course, all the economic impacts as well. This is impacting coastal economies, this is impacting tourism. And this is the problem that is relevant for everyone, whether you live on the coast or not. Trash can easily travel down watersheds, through storm drains, canals, and basically other waterways, man-made or not, and make its way out into bays, estuaries, and into the ocean. So it's this graphic here on the right is something that I like to show students, especially to really connect all of us to this problem. And luckily, this is an issue that we can solve. We have a suite of solutions already that exist that help us tackle this issue. Today, I'll be speaking primarily about the community efforts around this final aspect here on the spectrum, the increased capture and reuse. That's cleanups, obviously, and we've been doing cleanups for years. But now what we're all realizing, especially in the last 5 to 10 years, is that we need to work on upstream solutions to tackle the plastic pollution problem at the source, right? So this is everything from just reducing the amount of plastics that we're creating, working with industry, optimizing packaging, making plastics more recyclable, looking at alternatives, looking at policy. Really, it's a multifaceted approach to solving this problem, because as the science is showing us, with more and more studies coming out, the problem itself is multifaceted. So we're really going to have to tackle the issue in a number of ways. What I work on and what really excites me is the grassroots community efforts, and it's the education that I get to do with youth and all of the creative solutions that they come up with around the ocean plastics problem, whether it's from innovative cleanup mechanisms to upstream solutions like waste infrastructure improvements so that trash doesn't even get into the environment in the first place. So first, the International Coastal Cleanup. This is really what I want to dive into in the heart of my presentation, but I always show the faces behind the cleanup first. The ICC is really about community. It's about bringing people together who care about their waterways, their coasts. They don't even have to be on the coast. They can do cleanups on rivers, inland, estuaries, reservoirs, whatever it might be. And they're doing cleanups on boat, on foot, underwater scuba diving, all over the world. And this really all began back in 1986. So we've been doing this effort for about 35 years. It began on the Gulf Coast of Texas in the United States. The predecessors of what is now Ocean Conservancy noticed the trash problem on their local beach, and they really wanted to do something about it. So of course, beach cleanups have been happening for many, many years, but what we are so proud of and what the founders of the ICC had the foresight to do was to actually track the types and amount of debris that were collected during their cleanup event. And this is a tradition that has stayed throughout all 35 years of the ICC. And that is this citizen science data collection aspect. So not only do people get to go out, they get to have this really impactful, reflective experience where they are picking up trash. And a lot of times these are items that they see and use in their everyday lives. These are very common, mostly single-use plastic consumer items. But not only are they, putting them into bags and buckets and getting them out of the water, but they're actually recording the different types and amount of debris that they find. And they're weighing the trash at the end. So this really gives us a wonderful global snapshot of the ocean trash problem every year. So over the 35 years of the ICC, here are the numbers and what we've been able to accomplish as a global community. And it really wouldn't be possible without the network of country and US state coordinators that we call them, or partners, that really do lead their own networks on the ground and make cleanups happen in their communities. And then Ocean Conservancy acts more as the manager, where we provide universal resources like paper data cards, educational and informational posters about ocean trash and marine litter. We share our app that we developed for anyone to use, whether it's the ICC or year round. I'll talk more about that in a minute. But really, we just act as basically the hub and the glue that really keeps the international coastal cleanup community together. And we are so very proud and grateful of the partners that we have and the relationships that we've fostered over the years. Some of these coordinators in their countries have led the ICC for all 35 years. And I just alluded to this, but as the cleanup grows and as our understanding of the marine debris problem grows, we too wanted to make sure that the ICC evolved to continue to help combat and be part of the solution to this problem. Really where the ICC shines in that regard is the data. So we wanted to evolve our paper data card to kind of move into the 21st century and to be available on an app. So we created CleanSwell. It's a free app to download on any iOS or Android device. And basically what it does is it takes the paper data card categories, all the different trash items that we ask volunteers to record, and it puts it on a collection screen. So that's what you see here front and center. And really all volunteers do is they work together in teams, and they can have a designated data recorder who simply follows along with their team. And as they're collecting items, the team can call out, 2 beverage bottles, plastic beverage bottles, 3 plastic bags, and then the data recorder just taps on the collection screen, and the collection screen will keep a tally for their team as they go along. They submit their data, it goes automatically into an online open access database that we refer scientists to, policymakers, industry innovators. Really, that was like the big goal, is to make sure that the data are at the fingertips of everyone working on solutions to the ocean trash problem. And then we get a lot of common questions about the app, so I put some little bits of information at the bottom here as well. And throughout my presentation, I do have a couple of website links and URLs, and I plan on sharing basically the PDF of these slides, the slide deck, with the organizers so that they can share it with anyone in the audience who might be interested in learning more about anything that I mentioned here. So don't feel like you have to scribble down any of these website links. We'll be happy to share our slides with you as well. So a little bit about this year's International Coastal Cleanup. It was an interesting one indeed with the COVID-19 pandemic that we're all facing. We have been heartened to see so many people and to hear from so many volunteers and partners worldwide who still wanted to do cleanups, even during this time when really, conservation efforts and trash cleanup understandably has not really been at the top of the priority list. But for some, it's still something that they want to do. It's a way for people to get outside, even if it's just on a solo cleanup or with your family or your house. You can go out and still do a safe cleanup. And so Ocean Conservancy, my team, we worked really hard the last 6 months to develop some resources to make sure that volunteers were being safe. And we did some adaptations in the CleanSwell app to allow people to record cleanups maybe after they come home and after they're done with their cleanup so that they can stay safe and make sure that they're wearing gloves always, wearing a mask, being socially distant if that is applicable in their location. And really just making sure that the community and the momentum and the spirit of the International Coastal Cleanup can still take place this year, even if people are at home. So this WeCleanOn.org has a number of resources. Even if people can't go outside right now and do a cleanup, there are other ways that you can get involved virtually. I wanted to give you a taste about the rest of our program work. I had kind of alluded to this earlier, but we really do cherish the leaders of the International Coastal Cleanup. So in the normal year, we do have convenings, we have coordinator conferences, we call them, where we bring different regions of ICC leaders together. So this top right picture, this is the last coordinator conference we were able to have with our Caribbean ICC partner network. And these are just very rich couple-day conferences where we're able to come together, share best practices, understand and work through challenges together that we might all face. And a lot of us do come out of that with wonderful networking experiences and friendships and solutions to improve all of our individual ICC efforts. I work a lot with youth and education opportunities as well. We often have groups of youth visiting our office when our office is open. So that's what you see in the bottom left corner here. And we talk about what we do at Ocean Conservancy. And we just want to inspire the next generation, really. These are threats facing our ocean that are going to be around for a long time. So we want youth to feel empowered to be part of that solution with us. And I also had alluded earlier to the fact that our program, we really are based in sound science, and we do a lot with investing in and catalyzing new science and new research in the field of marine debris. And when we think about the grand scheme of marine science and other sciences, the topic of plastic pollution is actually quite new. So there are a lot of major research kind of driven questions that we have yet to understand. Things like where are those 8 million metric tons of trash ending up in our ocean? Are they floating? Do they sink to the bottom of the sea floor? Are they washing back onto our coasts and our beaches? We're starting to understand some of this, but there's still a lot of science yet to be done. So Ocean Conservancy continues to support that. And we work very closely with the University of Toronto and Dr. Chelsea Rockman in a lot of their lab's work. And a lot of the work that we're doing too, it focuses on working with the private sector because we do know that plastic manufacturers and companies creating products made of plastics need to be part of the solution set as well, and really holding them accountable for kind of this extended producer responsibility and getting them to be part of this circular economy solution that a lot of us are working on at the moment. So again, we have what we call the Trash Free Seas Alliance, and that is our roundtable of about 30 or more private companies, but also folks in academia and a handful of other nonprofit partners who come together and really focus on tangible, measurable improvements to the plastic pollution and ocean-bound plastic problem. So in the last couple of years, we've published these 2 reports, Stemming the Tide, and then the next wave was the subsequent report. And these were really looking at waste infrastructure and taking a look at the Dr. Jenna Jembeck paper, looking at the top countries where plastics are leaking into the ocean at the fastest rate, and then where there might be gaps in the financing of waste infrastructure in those systems, and working on solutions both economically and through just sheer waste infrastructure improvements to really kind of turn off the tap in those countries where plastics are leaking. And it's worth noting that 5 to 10 years down the road, there will be a whole nother suite of nations and economies that are rapidly developing where plastics will be leaking into the ocean there. So, you know, it's really something that as a global community, we are all responsible in one way or other to work on this solution together. And it really shouldn't be a country by country problem. I mean, the ocean is the one resource that we all share. And then on the side here, Urban Ocean, this is the logo for that. This is a very new effort under our program where we are working with cities globally to bring all stakeholders together, you know, in the smaller geography of one city and helping them and using other sister cities to work on waste infrastructure solutions there, and to bring all the stakeholders together from the formal waste collection to the informal waste collection sector, to educators and people really getting the messaging out and really getting community buy-in. And we've done quite a bit of work with policy as well. The International Coastal Cleanup data, all of the citizen science data that have been collected over the years have been used in countless policies from the national level, even international treaty level, all the way down to local community ordinances, beach rules, things like smoking bans on beaches, and everything in between. So a couple examples here, and I'd be happy to share. A number of groups and universities have worked on creating basically plastic policy libraries. It's a whole index of, you know, nation by nation, what sort of policies exist, whether it's bans or fees, for instance, on plastic bags and whatnot. So I'd be happy to share that information with anyone who might be interested in delving further into the policy side. And lastly, I have to put a little bit of a plug about the educational resources that we have. We do have a program that we call Talking Trash and Taking Action. It is geared for youth. It's available free online at this URL for formal and informal educators, for parents who just want to dive into the issue more with their students and with their kids, and learn more about what they can do to be part of the solution. And I will say all of the resources that we make, all of the outreach efforts that we do are all based in sound science. And so this graphic here in the center, this is from a recent study that we did, which I again can share a link to with more information in a paper that was published. But we essentially looked at the most common international coastal cleanup debris data. We looked at the most commonly collected items by volunteers, and we worked with experts in the marine field and basically did a survey, expert elicitation, to determine which items are most deadly to marine mammals, sea turtles, and shorebirds. And so this was kind of like the culmination of this analysis were these top 5 items that were most deadly. And of course, fishing gear, no surprise there, continues to be deadly after it's lost or abandoned in the ocean. And so we are, again, you know, based on the science, the more we learn, the more we can pivot and focus our work in those areas. I won't read this whole slide, but I do want to share with you, you know, I get this question a lot about what can I do as an individual, especially when I'm speaking with youth. And so some ideas that our team has come up with here, really just being an example and talking to your family, your community about this issue. Let your local leaders, your elected officials know that you care about this issue. That's, I think, probably the most important thing you can do. Use your power to vote. And that is all I have. So I want to just thank you all for your time. My contact information is here at the bottom. And again, a URL to connect with the International Coastal Cleanup season that is still going on this year for the 2020 ICC. Thank you for your time.
Sarah, thank you so much. I really enjoyed your presentation, and I hope that Ocean Conservancy's initiatives would reach more communities and people from around the world. Our last presenter on this webinar is Dr. Roger Ashker from Lebanon. Roger is the Group Head of Marketing and Strategy at Energy Group, and the Executive Director of Global Waste Cleaning Network, as well as the Dean of Research at the Environmental Network Research Center, ENRC. He holds a doctorate in social science from the University of Leicester, and an MBA from Cranfield University in the UK, a master's in systems management and engineering from Centrale Supélec University in France, and a master's in electromechanical engineering from St. Joseph University in Lebanon. He held many senior and managerial positions at multinational and regional organizations in the Middle East, and forged a track record of success across multiple industries, such as power generation, district energy and cooling, and e-business and marketing consulting. Roger is also an award-winning author. His next topic will be about the environmental and economic benefits of landfill gas power plants.
Hello. Imagine a future where communities are powered by the trash they throw away. Our waste can now be used as a source of renewable and sustainable energy. This happens primarily through two technologies: landfill gas to energy and waste to energy. In this presentation, I will be talking about landfill gas to energy conversion power plants, a topic of great importance to sustainable energy, as landfill gas is a free and high energy gas fuel that can substitute fossil fuels. Landfill gas collection typically begins after a portion of the landfill is closed to additional waste. It can be collected by either a passive or an active collection system. A typical collection system is composed of a series of gas collection wells placed throughout the landfill. The number and spacing of the wells depend on landfill-specific characteristics, such as volume, density, depth, and area. Most collection systems are designed with a degree of redundancy to ensure continued operation and protect against system failure. Redundancy in a system may include extra gas collection wells in case one well fails. In some cases, landfill gas collected through the wells gets burned and flared into the atmosphere. The purpose of flaring is to dispose of the methane gas, although flaring can also release toxic emissions into the air. One of the efficient ways to stop flaring the methane gas is to build local gas-fired power plants. Depending upon the landfill design, as well as waste composition, compaction, moisture, and several other factors, landfills are available to collect and use this valuable renewable energy source for power generation. More than 70% of the landfill gas energy projects that generate electricity use internal combustion engines, while others run on gas turbines and microturbines. This is a top view of a 6-megawatt electric engine-based gas-to-energy conversion power plant. On the right, we can see the collection area of the gas that is treated first before running the gas-generating sets on the top left. And the gas treatment system is, in this typical example, made of 3 stages. The cooling stage, where the gas is cooled using chillers to remove any moisture from it. The reheating stage, where the gas is heated again before the final treatment stage, where gas goes through active carbon filters for the removal of impurities like siloxane, which is a non-toxic compound, but which can cause great damage to the generating sets through the buildup of silicon dioxide. If we compare a conventional diesel reciprocating engine power plant to a landfill gas engine power plant of the same rating, we find that the latter has significant advantages over the conventional power system. For the same 3 megawatt capacity of power plants, as an example here, We are comparing both in terms of environmental effects and economic savings. Over the 20 years of operation of the 3-megawatt landfill power plant, which is the maximum period that the landfill is able to produce gas, greenhouse gas emissions that are produced by a 3-megawatt conventional engine-based power plant would be reduced by about 2 million tons of carbon dioxide. On the methane side, landfills are in fact the third largest human-caused source of methane emissions. A landfill gas power plant can capture from 60 to 90% of the methane created by the landfill, depending on the system design and effectiveness. Also, a small 3-megawatt landfill power plant can save around 818,000 barrels of diesel over 20 years of operation, and that is not a small number. So, in conclusion, by participating in landfill gas-to-energy projects, countries can enhance their image as environmental leaders. Reducing landfill gas emissions by converting them to energy reduces local ozone levels and smog formation, and diminishes explosion threats and odors created by the landfill. This makes the area surrounding the landfill a better place to live. Landfill gas-to-energy investment projects are also win-to-win opportunities for the power producers and their surrounding communities. Such projects produce profits from the sale and use of electricity and generate related benefits for communities. Much of the project cost is spent locally for drilling, piping, construction, and operational personnel, providing additional economic benefits to the community through increased employment. And finally, I would like to thank you all for your attention and interest.
Thank you, Dr. Ashker, for this instructive presentation about landfill power plants. With this, we come to the end of our webinar. We hope you enjoyed all our informative sessions. Please check our website gwcnweb.org for upcoming webinars and summits. Goodbye.